Here is the hardcore truth that outdoor gear manufacturers desperately want to keep hidden because it completely invalidates their entire business model, which is built on selling you overpriced equipment you don't actually require. A person experiencing homelessness with just $30 and access to basic materials can build a shelter system that outperforms your $300 tent in nearly every measurable category that truly matters for survival. Right now, you are likely thinking this sounds completely absurd because you have been conditioned by decades of marketing to believe
Diagnostics
that survival
complete.
necessitates
Systems nominal.
expensive, specialized gear. However, the physics of heat retention and moisture management do not care about brand names or price tags. What I am about to show you is based on thermal engineering principles that have kept humans alive for thousands of years, before REI even existed as a company. The typical camping tent you spend hundreds of dollars on is fundamentally just a single layer of ripstop nylon or polyester stretched over aluminum poles. While it keeps rain off your head and blocks some wind, it does almost nothing to address your body's primary threat in outdoor conditions, which is heat loss through conduction and radiation. Your body generates roughly 100 watts of heat at rest, which is about the same as a standard incandescent light bulb. That tent you are so proud of lets almost all of that precious thermal energy escape directly into the night air without any meaningful resistance. Military studies on cold weather survival have conclusively proven that the human body loses heat through 5 distinct pathways that most recreational campers completely fail to understand or address properly. Conduction steals your warmth through direct contact with cold surfaces at a rate 25 times faster than air alone. This is exactly why sleeping on the ground without proper insulation underneath you will drain your core temperature, even if you are wrapped in the most expensive sleeping bag money can buy. Convection pulls heat away through air movement. Radiation allows your body heat to simply radiate away into the surrounding environment. Respiration causes you to lose warmth with every breath you exhale into cold air. Finally, evaporation from perspiration creates a cooling effect that can actually push you toward hypothermia if you are not careful about moisture management. The genius of the homeless shelter hack lies in how it systematically addresses every single one of these heat loss pathways using materials that cost almost nothing and can be sourced from hardware stores or even salvaged from common waste streams. The foundation of this system starts with something that sounds completely counterintuitive until you understand the thermodynamics at work. Building your sleeping platform at least 6 inches above the frozen ground. Using salvaged wooden pallets or scrap lumber creates an insulating air gap beneath your body. This elevated platform immediately eliminates the most dangerous heat loss pathway by breaking the conductive connection between your body and the earth, which acts like an infinite heat sink that will drain your warmth all night long, no matter how many blankets you pile on top of yourself. Construction workers and logistics companies throw away thousands of wooden pallets every single day. 2 or 3 of them stacked and lashed together create a sleeping platform that rivals expensive camping cots that outdoor stores charge hundreds of dollars for without providing any additional functional benefit. The next layer involves something that homeless survival experts discovered through brutal trial and error over countless freezing nights. Cardboard is one of the most underrated insulation materials available when you understand how to use it correctly for maximum thermal efficiency. Flattened cardboard boxes contain thousands of tiny air pockets within their corrugated structure. Air is actually one of the best insulators known to physics because it conducts heat extremely poorly when trapped in small spaces that prevent convection currents from forming. Layering 4 to 6 sheets of flattened cardboard on top of your elevated platform creates an insulation barrier with an R value that approaches what you would find in commercial sleeping pads, except your version costs absolutely nothing if you know where to look. Here is where the system gets really interesting. and where the physics starts to dramatically outperform conventional camping setups. The outer structure uses a principle called radiant barrier technology, which NASA originally developed for spacecraft thermal management, but works just as effectively for keeping a human body warm in terrestrial conditions when applied correctly. Emergency Mylar blankets, which you can purchase for $2 or $3 each at any hardware store, are coated with a microscopically thin layer of aluminum that reflects up to 90% of radiant heat energy back toward its source, instead of allowing it to escape into the environment. When you create a small enclosed space by draping these reflective blankets over a simple frame constructed from branches or PVC pipe, you are essentially building a highly efficient thermal envelope that captures and redirects your body's radiant heat back onto you throughout the entire night. The key is making the shelter volume small enough that your 100-watt biological furnace can actually warm the interior airspace, which is exactly the opposite of what most campers do when they buy the largest tent they can afford. Without understanding that bigger internal volume means more cold air your body has to heat up before you feel any warmth at all, your $300 tent is essentially a fabric box that provides almost zero insulation value. It actually works against you by creating a large volume of cold air that actively pulls heat away from your body through convection currents. The homeless shelter system flips this completely backwards by creating the smallest possible insulated envelope around your body. This is why people who understand these principles can sleep comfortably in temperatures where conventional campers are shivering inside their expensive gear, wondering why they are so cold despite spending a fortune. The complete system requires you to understand one additional component that multiplies the effectiveness of everything we have discussed: active insulation. This is the technical term for using your own body heat to pre-warm your sleeping environment before you actually climb inside. It transforms a cold shelter into a warm cocoon through a simple 15-minute process that requires nothing more than a couple of plastic bottles and access to hot water. Fill 2 standard 1-liter bottles with the hottest water you can safely handle. Seal them tightly to prevent any possibility of leaks that could soak your insulation, and place them inside your sleeping system approximately 20 minutes before you plan to go to sleep. Those bottles become thermal batteries that radiate approximately 500 British thermal units of heat energy into your enclosed space, raising the interior temperature by 10 to 15 degrees before your body even touches the sleeping surface. When you finally climb into a shelter that is already warm, instead of forcing your metabolism to heat up cold materials from scratch, you conserve enormous amounts of energy that your body would otherwise burn through shivering. This means you wake up more rested and maintain a better core temperature throughout the entire night. The truly revolutionary aspect of this approach becomes apparent when you start comparing the actual performance metrics against conventional camping gear that outdoor companies market as essential for cold weather survival. A high-end 0-degree sleeping bag from a premium manufacturer costs anywhere from $400 to $800, weighs approximately 4 pounds, and provides warmth through expensive down insulation or synthetic fills that lose their effectiveness when they get wet. The homeless shelter system we have constructed costs less than $20 in materials if you have to purchase everything new, and weighs roughly the same 4 pounds when you account for the Mylar blankets and cardboard. It outperforms that expensive sleeping bag in almost every measurable category because it attacks the heat loss problem from multiple angles simultaneously. Instead of relying on a single insulation method, you have eliminated conductive heat loss through the ground by creating an elevated platform with multiple insulation layers beneath your body, something that a sleeping bag completely fails to address because it assumes you will purchase a separate sleeping pad for another $100. You have minimized convective heat loss by creating a small enclosed volume that prevents air currents from stripping away your warmth, which is something tent manufacturers charge you extra money for when they sell you vestibules and rain flies as separate accessories. You have drastically reduced radiant heat loss by surrounding yourself with reflective barriers that bounce your infrared radiation back onto your skin instead of letting it escape into the night sky. The conventional camping setup addresses maybe one or two of these heat loss mechanisms if you are lucky and have spent a small fortune on gear, while the homeless shelter system tackles all of them simultaneously using materials that most people literally throw in the garbage without recognizing their survival value. This is precisely why you see experienced homeless individuals surviving brutal winters in cities like Chicago or Minneapolis, while inexperienced campers die of exposure in far milder conditions despite having thousands of dollars worth of REI equipment in their backpacks. Knowledge of thermodynamic principles and resourceful application of available materials beats expensive gear every single time when you understand what you are actually fighting against. The final consideration involves understanding that this system scales and adapts to different scenarios in ways that conventional gear absolutely cannot match because it is modular and improvised rather than fixed and manufactured. If the temperature drops unexpectedly and you need more insulation, you simply add another layer of cardboard or drape an additional Mylar blanket over your structure, which takes 30 seconds and costs nothing if you have stockpiled materials. If you need to shelter multiple people, you build a larger frame and extend the reflective barrier to cover the expanded space, maintaining the same thermal efficiency principles with minimal additional effort. If you have to relocate quickly because of threats or flooding, you can abandon the bulky components like pallets and cardboard because they are replaceable, carrying only the lightweight Mylar blankets that provide the majority of your thermal protection. Try doing any of that with a tent and sleeping bag system that represents a fixed investment you cannot modify or replace without returning to a store that probably does not exist anymore in a genuine survival situation. The military actually understands these principles better than the civilian camping industry, which is why Special Forces survival training teaches soldiers to build debris huts and improvised shelters rather than relying on equipment that can be lost or damaged in the field. A Navy SEAL operating in a hostile environment does not carry a $400 sleeping bag because it is a liability that announces his presence and creates dependence on gear he might not be able to replace. He carries knowledge of how to construct effective shelter from whatever materials the environment provides. This is exactly the mindset that separates people who survive genuine emergencies from people who freeze to death waiting for rescue that never comes. When you internalize these principles and practice building these systems before you actually need them in a crisis, you develop a capability that transcends any piece of equipment you could purchase because you become truly self-reliant rather than dependent on manufactured solutions. The next time you walk past a homeless encampment and see Mylar blankets glinting in the sunlight or cardboard arranged in seemingly random configurations, recognize that you are looking at applied thermodynamics and practical physics that keeps people alive when they have absolutely nothing else protecting them from the elements that want them dead. Understanding these principles transforms how you view both expensive gear and resourceful improvisation, proving that survival knowledge outweighs any equipment you could ever purchase from a store. The $30 shelter system beats your $300 tent because it addresses actual physics rather than marketing promises. This is exactly why those who understand thermodynamics sleep warm, while others freeze despite their expensive gear. If this breakdown of survival physics changed how you view the gear in your pack, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the practical truths and history that the industry tries to hide. Equip your mind, not just your bag. The next survival blueprint will be revealed soon.